Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order the September 22nd, 2020 regular meeting of the Common Council. Carrie, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Clark.
Here.
Ms. Herbstritt. Here. Mr. Hill.
Here.
Ms. McKiernan. Here. Mr. Sullivan.
Here.
Mr. Veach.
Here.
Mr. Wiley.
Here.
Mr. Willingham.
Here.
And Mayor Smith.
Here. We will now observe a moment of silence and be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Vice Mayor Hill. Please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. We have before us the minutes of the September 8, 2020 regular and work session meeting minutes. Unless there are edits, changes, or deletions, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The next item is the report of the mayor. I would like to say thank you to Mary Beth for stepping in as our interim city manager. We appreciate her being there for us and taking on the job. We'll miss you, and thank you very much. And we'd like to welcome Dan Hoffman, who's here this evening and will be starting at our next regular meeting. Welcome, Dan. Other than that, I don't have any other items on mine. So we have the report of the city manager.
Yeah, this is my last meeting, and I just wanted to tell folks that back home, I would say, when I committed as the interim city manager, it was before the pandemic. And in my first day, I ended up closing the city buildings and declared a local state of emergency. But I do want to thank the mayor and all of city council for trusting me to serve the city over the past 6 months. It's been a pleasure for me to work within the city, and I appreciate what you all do as elected officials. I don't know if anybody has any idea. I also want to thank the employees and the department managers of the city. You have a very hardworking and dedicated team that's continued to provide services all through this COVID pandemic. It's been a pleasure to work with them all. I'll be passing the baton to Dan on Friday. And Dan, you have a great staff and leadership team, and I wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you. The next is the report of the city attorney.
I have nothing at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
So we'll be moving on to public hearings. Our first public hearing is a second reading, an ordinance to amend Chapter 26 of the Winchester City Code by adding an Article 4 pertaining to public right-of-way and allowing for small-cell wireless facilities. Presented by Mr. Eisenach. Mr. Eisenach is not here, so do we have Kelly Henshaw? Good evening, Kelly.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. If you all have any questions about the small cell ordinance, we're here to answer.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this matter? You have 3 minutes. Please come to the podium. There being none, I will close the public hearing. Is there any discussion?
Mayor, motion approved.
Second.
Carrie, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Ms. Herbstritt.
Yes.
Mr. Hill.
Yes.
Ms. McKiernan.
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan.
Yes.
Mr. Veach,
Yes.
Mr. Wiley,
Yes.
Mr. Willingham,
Yes.
and Mayor Smith.
Yes. And that moves forward. Kelly, thank you.
That was very easy.
Thank you. Good stuff.
The next item on the agenda is also a second reading. It's a ROW-20-367, an ordinance to vacate and convey a 2,057 square foot portion of the Center Street right-of-way adjacent to 152 Fox Drive, presented by Mr. Humans. Good evening, Tim.
Evening, Mayor, members of council. There's nothing new to report on this since your review of this at the work session. I do want to clarify, however, that this is just the public hearing this evening. With right-of-way vacations, there's that intermediate step between first reading and second reading. So second reading could occur at your next meeting. This is just the public hearing and later on your agenda, the appointment of the viewers, but there is no action required by council this evening. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
If there's anyone who wishes to speak on this matter, please come to the podium. You have 3 minutes. Did you wish to speak on this matter? Yes, can you come to the podium, state your name and address?
I'm Miranda Del Marico. I live at 154 Umps Drive. We own a house at 152 Fox Drive. The house is located on what was to be Center Street. It is a 2-block area of green space. Utilities are under it. My husband and I would like, and the utilities have been, I believe, researched. My husband and I would like to buy the driveway portion, which is 17 feet, and it goes 100 and a few feet deep. That's it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this matter? There being none, I will close the public hearing. Mr. Humans, do we need to discuss the monetary value of the right-of-way?
Council will need to decide that at some point, working with the Finance Department in terms of the standard approach that you've used. On other ones, we anticipate the same approach here, but I do want to note that the city will be retaining an easement for infrastructure, primarily stormwater management, so it will probably be substantially reduced because of the restriction that imposes on, for example, doing a garage addition to the house versus just utilizing it for the surface driveway.
Thank you. What is the pleasure of the body? Sorry. This is just a discussion item. Thank you, Mr. Humans. The next item is also a second reading, RZ-20-371, an ordinance to rezone 9.65 acres of land at 654 Fox Drive from low-density residential district to low-density residential district with planned unit development overlay district. Tim, you're on this as well. That's okay.
Thank you,
That
Mr.
item
Mayor,
was
members of
pulled from the
council.
agenda. That item was pulled from the agenda. That was the one I sent an email.
Right.
The adjacent property owner letters did not get mailed,
Correct.
so this will be moved to your October 13 meeting.
So it's been pulled from the
This has
agenda.
been pulled, yes, sir.
Yeah, we need to provide adequate time to send the adjoining property owner letters, and that did not get done 10 days in advance of today's meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is public comments. Now is the time on our agenda. If there's anyone here who wishes to address council, if so, you have 3 minutes. Please come to the podium, state your name and address. The first person I have is Christine Giermeyer. Christine? Good evening.
Good evening. Mayor Smith, Vice Mayor Hill, Vice President Clark, and esteemed city council members. My name is Christine Germeyer, and I am the Executive Director of For First Night Winchester, a New Year's Eve tradition with a mission of bringing friends and families together to unite our community in all its diversity through the visual and performing arts. More importantly, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization who depends on the support of local donors. I want to take this opportunity to thank the City of Winchester for unwavering support for the last 34 years. It takes a great deal of collaboration with nearly every department of the city to ensure a safe, successful event for the entire community. COVID-19 has had a significant impact on the local economy, business owners, and a multitude of families. It has limited many, like First Night Winchester, from operating under normal protocols, and it could foreseeably end several cherished traditions. Admittedly, the pandemic caused us to pause from our usual activities, but as people became open to the idea of moving to a virtual, we conceded to do the same. I'm here to share a letter to OTAC from the chairman of our board, which reads, "It has come to my attention that the minutes of your meeting on August 6, 2020 in section 4.4 Virginia Commission for the Arts contain the statement the possibility that First Night Winchester may have to be canceled entirely. Such is not correct. Members of our board would like the public to know that we continue to plan for First Night Winchester 34th New Year's Eve annual event. As a nonprofit organization, we rely on the generous donations and corporate sponsorships from members within our community. We respectfully request that you amend your August 6, 2020 minutes by removing Ms. Alex Flanagan's mistaken statement, as we feel this could be have detrimental consequences in our fundraising attempts. We also request that there be some form of public announcement to that effect." The letter concludes, "So as everyone has had to become more flexible, we had to become more creative. Our efforts to maintain our tradition and uphold our mission in Winchester are being squelched by a reduction of grant funding and now a statement made by an individual who is not communicating with or on behalf of our organization. For many businesses, First Night Winchester helps generate the largest profitable day of their year. First Night Winchester will not look like it has in the past. It has been reimagined for the present pandemic, but we remain optimistic that the new year and all of our futures will be better, because the new year always brings with it an abundance of hope. I would encourage you to contact me directly if you ever have any questions. I thank you for your time this evening, and I look forward to continuing our partnership and working alongside you as we ring in this and many future New Years together. Thank you."
Thank you. The next person I have to speak is Miranda, but I think she left. I did see her leave after she spoke. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak to us? If not, I will close public comments and move on to consent agenda. Oh, did you want to speak? Yeah. I can't hear you. Okay, can you get up and state your name and address, please?
Hello, I'm Kim Craig, and I wanted to address you all because I purchased a property not so long ago, early June actually, 1200 Valley Avenue. One of my favorite things as an adult has been, recently, has been buying property in downtown Winchester, revitalizing it, making it trendy, buying apartments that are decrepit and making them nice for women and children living in their cars and giving them an opportunity. Half my properties are residential, half are commercial, and I love this property, but I need your help because it is such a small footprint. Almost anyone that goes in has a high chance of failing. Half of small businesses fail anyway, then you add COVID, which has made more businesses fail more than ever. So I put a conditional use permit in to cover 5 different categories, which you all have read. And I know I got it to here and I thought it was done, and then I hear you all had concerns. And I own 4 properties near there. I love kids, Hanley. I want to respect any concerns you have, but like I have a girlfriend, she wants to cut hair there. Well, this permit is $625, add postage, going to Staples, mailings and stuff. She has to cut 68 haircuts just to pay for this process and maybe turn down. So I want to bear the expense, cover as many things as I can. A girlfriend that wants to do homemade buns from there, an ice cream parlor wants to go in there. I get 3 calls a week, and I've not even advertised this place. So I would like to bear the cost of the build out for whoever goes in, going through this process as many times as I need to, but when you all do come back and talk on this, I happen to be on vacation, the one and only I'm getting this year, and that's the week I've been assigned. I don't want to push this out any further, not even one more week of talking, so I'm hoping that you all can narrow my categories as you deem fit, and I will make sure that anybody that goes in there is a good partner for the categories. I guess that's all I have to say. And thank you. Thank you, Frank, and thank you, Mr. Humans. They have held my hand so much to get me through this, and some of the city councilmen.
So Kim, I can scratch you off of the other one because you signed up.
Yeah, knowing
Okay.
me, I signed
I
up
just
for the
wanted to
wrong
make
form.
sure.
Yes, yes, that's
Okay.
one and done.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? If not, I will now close the public comments and move to the consent agenda. Would any member like to remove an item from the consent agenda? If not, I'll now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's a motion from Herbstreit and a second from Hill. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The next item is the City of Winchester's Comprehensive Employee Management System recommendations presented by Paula Norsinger, Human Resource Director.
That's consent item.
Sorry, we're done with that. Thank you. So we're moving on to the agenda. The first item on the agenda is a motion to appoint an in-house viewers for 0-2020-45 ROW 2367 in ordinance to vacate and convey a 2,057 square foot portion of the Center Street right-of-way adjacent to 152 Fox Drive. I will entertain a motion to appoint Chief Cope, Chief Piper, and Perry Eisenach as in-house viewers for 0-2020-45 ROW 20-367 in ordinance to vacate and convey a 2,057 square foot portion of the Center Street right-of-way adjacent to 152 Fox Drive.
Second.
So I have a motion from Willingham and a second from Wiley. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The next item is the second reading, an ordinance authorizing an amended memorandum of agreement with Shenandoah University for the capital improvement and management of Bridgeforth Field and Rotary Field in the Jim Barnett Park, presented by Lynn Miller. And Melissa Michelson. Good
Good
evening,
evening, Mr.
ma'am.
Mayor, members of council. I'll come back before you tonight in
Can
relationship.
you slide the microphone closer to you?
Sure. Is that better?
A little bit closer.
How about that? Can you
Think
hear me?
so. Yes.
All right. Good evening again. We'll start over. I'm back before you this evening in relationship to the amended memorandum of agreement between the City of Winchester and Shenandoah University for capital projects in Jim Barnett Park involving Bridgeforth Field, Rotary Field, Bodie Grimm Field, and Hinkle Harris Field. There really have not been any changes since I was before you 2 weeks ago, other than the site plan has been submitted, it's being reviewed, and it doesn't appear to be any difficulties with that being approved, and that should move forward. Vice President Moore with Shenandoah University is with us this evening. If you have any questions of him, or certainly I'd be glad to answer any questions on behalf of the department.
Are there any questions from Mr. Miller? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Oh, you have a question?
I guess
Oh,
that's,
sorry.
last time, Lynn, or maybe this is a question for Mitch, last time this agreement wasn't executed, do we intend that this one will be?
I'm sorry, sir, I couldn't hear you.
Last time, this this agreement was not executed, do we intend for this one to be executed?
Mr. Willingham, I would certainly hope so.
I can address that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's scheduled for tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the issues that prevented the execution of the last MOA have all been resolved, and the bond has been received, so we're all good for execution.
Thanks. Thank you.
I apologize, but I should have probably mentioned that the bonding had been taken care of on all three of the projects.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
I will now entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Carrie, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Herbstritt?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. McKiernan?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Veach?
Yes.
Mr. Wiley?
Yes.
Mr. Willingham?
Yes.
And Mayor Smith?
Yes, and that moves forward. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you, sir.
The next item we have on the agenda is a resolution in support of first responders in Winchester City, presented by Councilor Veach.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a resolution that, as it stated, it's showing support publicly of the first responders in our city, including but not limited to the police department, sheriff's department, fire and rescue, dispatchers, the emergency management, front line workers, and other good men and women who are first responders. It's a straightforward resolution stating our support for the first responders. Public safety is one of our core services that the citizens expect, and we try to deliver. When a citizen calls for help or needs them, they show up, a lot of times in harm's way. They are taking risk every time they go out. So a lot of times right now we're hearing where some communities are trying to reduce their first responders and sometimes reducing the public safety. So I drew this up to reassure our first responders and citizens that they have our support and our respect, and that's why I put it in, submitted it, and hope it passes. Thank you.
Councilors, do you have any questions? I will now entertain the motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That moves forward. The next item is a resolution of support for an agreement for the continuity of a healthcare services partnership between Valley Health and Anthem of Virginia, presented by Mr. Wiley.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I'm sure you're aware that recently we found out that Anthem and Valley Health are at a crossroads right now in terms of whether or not in agreement with renewing their contract. And I felt it prudent for our constituents, many of whom businesses and residents of this area in the Greater Northern Shenandoah Valley are involved one way or another as they use Anthem as a provider for their health insurance. So on September 1st, 2020, city employees were notified of this possibility that contract negotiations between Valley Health and Anthem could fail to reach an agreement before the current contract expires on December 1st, 2020. So I felt it prudent to bring this forward to see if we could craft something along the lines to stress the importance of getting these two parties to come together to work out an agreement in light of a pandemic we're dealing with COVID and how much it affects the greater population of the Valley, constituents, as well as businesses, and our city staff, of course. So I wanted to put this together, and certainly staff did a good job of putting this together, this resolution, and I would appreciate your support on this matter. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Wiley? There being none, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Wiley.
Second.
Oh, I was going to second. I just wanted to say something. Mary Beth, I just wanted to echo the mayor's comments. We put you in an unenviable position when you started here, not by our own design. But I know I've heard from a lot of citizens, staff, and other folks that work and interact with the city. And I think we're all extremely appreciative of all the hard work that you've done, all the hours that you've put in. You have really been a really rock of stability for this city and for our staff and for this council. And so for that, I just wanted to personally thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Oh, Wiley did. Second.
Were you raising your hand to speak, or you
Just
raised?
clarifying, I made the motions originally there, Mayor.
So we have a motion from Councilor Wiley and a second from McKiernan. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are now adjourned. We'll be back in a few minutes. I would like to call to order the September 22nd, 2020 work session of the Common Council. Carrie, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Clark.
Here.
Ms. Herbstreit.
Here.
Mr. Hill.
Here.
Ms. McKiernan.
Here.
Mr. Sullivan.
Here.
Mr. Veach.
Here.
Mr. Wiley.
Here.
Mr. Willingham.
Here.
And Mayor Smith.
Here. The next item on the agenda is public comments. Now is the time on our agenda where anyone who wishes to speak can come to the podium. You have 3 minutes. I have a Donald Kane and an Isabella Stucco. And you both are speaking on the same item? Okay, so there's a total of 3 minutes, so did you guys want to split your time? Like a minute and a half, or does one person want to do it? Okay. State your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Isabella Stocco, and I live in the city of Winchester, in the Whittier Acres neighborhood. I would like the ordinance of having chickens changed because I think it is important for everyone to have the experience of housing laying hens on their property. Some of the benefits of housing chickens are the ability to observe how a very common ingredient used in kitchens for baking and cooking is produced. I think it is important for our bodies and minds to eat locally grown products and to know where our food comes from. I am aware that people may think that chickens are noisy and that their odor is unpleasant, but many household pets that are allowed within the city limits, especially dogs, which I love, can be noisy and smelly like chickens. But if one keeps the area as clean as possible, which I will do, then it will decrease the smell. Roosters are very noisy, but I have no intention of keeping one. Local governments used to encourage people to house chickens because the cost is low and almost every backyard has room enough for as many chickens as you need to supply your family with breakfast. Other cities in Virginia currently allow chickens. Some examples are Arlington, Alexandria, Blacksburg, and Warrenton. I would love to see Winchester join the list. Thank you for taking the time to consider my request, and I hope for a positive vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Beth, were there any comments received online?
No, sir.
Thank you. Moving on to the agenda. Sorry.
I had a public comment. Do I have time?
Well, like how much time does he
I
have?
still have a minute and 22 seconds.
You have a minute and 22 seconds.
Okay. My name's Donald Kane. I live across the street from Ms. Stocco. I know her to be a very responsible and respectful young lady, and I suspect given the opportunity to raise chickens, she would do so in a manner that reflects those qualities. But having said that, even if she didn't, the layout of their property is such that their yard is naturally secluded, and with the fencing they have in place, I don't know how anybody would ever know they had chickens back there if she did. So I just want to speak out in support of her being able to raise chickens in her backyard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I will now close the public comments. Moving on to the agenda. The first item is an ordinance to authorize the additional appropriation of funds for necessary expenditures of the City of Winchester, Virginia for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021, presented by Celeste Broadstreet, Financial Services Director. Good evening, Celeste.
Good evening, Mayor Smith, members of council. Is it okay if I take this off?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Thank you for having me this evening. I'm here with this, like as you mentioned, the supplemental appropriation for the FY21 budget. You can see in your packet the amendments include an amendment to the general fund, which is an increase of $6,370,064. Part of that is the CARES Act. Thank you, Tyler. Part of that is CARES Act funding. I'm going to skip that for a minute, and I'll come back to that if that's okay. The other major part of that appropriation is $4,724,419. That's carry forward for capital projects. You'll see on the second page of the CAM there a list of the projects: North Cameron drainage improvements, Boscawen, all those things that have been in the FY20 budget that we're just carrying forward. Those would consist of the local dollars plus state, federal money, and some local also in that. So then we have an amendment to the Emergency Services Fund for $43,437. That's for CARES Act funding. We just got some guidance today on what we can do, so we've got to go through that to see how we can spend that money. But we wanted to go ahead and appropriate that. The parking authority, $600,000 carry forward appropriation. That's for automated equipment in the garages to replace the automated cashiers there. That's fund balance carry forward for the parking authority, so there's no general fund money involved in that. And of course, I just talked about the capital forward carry forwards for the capital improvement fund. And then the Frederick Winchester Service Authority would increase by $235,000. Again, that's kind of a carry forward, and that's for a roof replacement out there at the Opequon plant. The last page of your packet for this shows you, Council had asked for an update on the CARES Act funding that we have. If you could scroll on to the next sheet, keep going, please. That last packet with the charts, and I've given you this chart before, but this is updated. Keep going. There we go. So again, that first chart there shows you what we spent in FY20, gives you the categories. So we spent $747,000. Put my glasses on, sorry. $815 in FY20. You can see the categories there: telework, operations, disinfection, sanitation, PPE, public safety salaries and hazard pay that we worked on, and other government services would include things like putting up barriers and signages and that type of thing. And then we had allocated some money for the city schools, so you can see that there. Then you can see the totals for FY21 in the middle chart there. The schools will be buying a bus. They've ordered it, but it hasn't, as far as I know, it hasn't been received yet, but it is on order. The mortgage and rental assistance that we talked about, Mary talked about last week, or I'm sorry, at the last meeting. So we've released those funds to the United Way. I do have a brief update from the United Way. They've had some good response. Doesn't look like we'll need to send out any mailers because they've got lots of interest in that. They've so far issued about $25,000 of that, about 18 payments. They had 18 payments for utilities and then 14 payments for rent assistance. So they actually, and they've had inquiries from 62 households in the city of Winchester. So that's all good news for that. As you can see the rest of that. The small business, that first round we talked about, we did about $150,000 in small business grants through the EDA and about $105,000 of grants to nonprofits. We're working on, the EDA is in the process of taking applications for the second round. I was told they have about maybe 30, projecting maybe 30 applications will be received for that second round. So you can see that. So going back to the first part and then the total. So you see we received $4,899,000. So of that we spent about 2.5 currently, so we have about 2.4 left to spend for the CARES Act. So the general fund, what we're appropriating now would be $1,645,000. And that's just kind of the balance between what we appropriated at the last time we did this and what we spent in FY20. You can see there is the Office of Elections did get a separate allocation of CARES funds, $57,063. That's to cover costs associated with the upcoming election and all the different things they have to do for COVID. So Liz Martin will be tracking that. So we are allocating another $100,000 to EDA to do more business grants, and then $200,000 for more nonprofits, and then the remaining balance would go towards just city operations. We're working on numerous projects. We're working on getting a modular building for the fire department at the training center, so they can do, with their upcoming classes, they'll have a larger space so they can social distance and get that done there at the training center. We're looking at some things for public works, for public health, those type of things. I'd really like to thank all the staff. They've been super great in coming up with ideas and working with purchasing and trying to get everything, make sure we get everything procured properly. I do anticipate that we would be coming back once the second round of the EDA has been completed, that we may be coming back to you in October, November timeframe to maybe reallocate any funds that haven't been spent. Like I say, if you look at that chart, we had allocated with the additional 100,000, 920,000 for small business grants and nonprofits. So far, we've spent 372, so there's still about 574,000 left. So if there's money left in these pots, public safety salaries, we could reallocate those. But we're still trying to work through all the, things that we have and the things we've planned to do and what we can do. So with that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Celeste. Are there any questions for Celeste?
I have a question.
Councilor Herbstreit.
With regards to the PPEs and the disinfection and all that kind of stuff, we don't know what December, January, February. So are you looking at anticipating enough material to carry out if needed into February, March? Is that part of what's being planned and anticipated?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Emergency management, we do have a pod here that has extra supplies in it. Right now, we're finding a shortage of gloves. Seems like right now we have enough N95 masks and those type of things, but purchasing's working hard on looking at all different kinds of sources to try to find things. But yeah, we hope to have, with CARES funding, there isn't prohibition against stockpiling too much, but we can have some inventory there. But yes, we'll definitely that's part of that $1 million that we have there for city things would be part of that. So,
thank you.
Sure.
Celeste, I have a couple of questions. So since we turned over to the CARES Act funding to be to the United Way, it seems that they're having a lot more success than the city did as far as outreach. Do you have any reason why that is?
We actually talked to Nadine there at United Way, and we asked, if you go through this allocation of the 400,000, would you be willing to take some more if we had extra funding that we could reallocate? And they're looking into that. There's some audit issues. If they get over $750,000 in federal funding, you have to go through single audit, in which it's an additional expense, audit expense. But yeah, it seems like they've got good response there. So yeah,
good.
We can partner with them. That's really helpful.
Great.
Yeah, so we are exploring that.
And the other question was the EDA. You said that they had 30 businesses signed up. So like how many businesses are they looking for total, and what would be the allocation of funds for the businesses?
So so it's open for anybody to apply, just they have to meet their criteria and they have to supply their expenses, because it is a reimbursable grant. So it's open basically any business in the city. There are some criteria. They're looking for the third round maybe to expand it to include even more. But the 30 businesses, I think, is just the contact that they've had. They don't have 30 applications yet, but that's just kind of the contact. Sometimes they wait till the last minute. I think they have till September 30th to submit.
Okay.
And the max on those currently is $5,000 that we could reimburse.
Was there a level for $10,000 as well, or was that part of the CARES Act? That's a different funding.
The 5,000 was just kind of a limit that we set. The city set. You can set a higher limit. That was what we went with. But yeah, 5,000 is the max. We don't have the 10. It's something if we could look at raising that limit if the council desires in the third round.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Councilor McKiernan?
For the daycare funding, who is able to access that? I understand nonprofits. Is it any nonprofit daycare? Mm-hmm. Are they able to, if they receive funding the first time, can they receive funding again? Just how is that mechanism working?
So right now, if they did receive funding in the first round, the 5,000, there is a 5,000 max, so they wouldn't be able to receive it in the second round. Don't have those numbers. There were a couple daycares, I think, that applied, not a whole lot. We have been doing vigorous, aggressive outreach to all the daycares in the city, asking them to apply. How can we help? What expenditures do you have? So we're really trying to do the outreach through United Way's done outreach, Social Services has done outreach, Amber's done a great job. She's contacted everybody. I think the EDA has been contacting people. We're working on a couple other options that we may be able to bring back at the next round.
So at this point, it's underutilized.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, we
Council
reached out
Wood-
to the, I'm sorry.
Sorry. No, go ahead.
We've reached out to the volunteer fire stations.
Right.
Chief Culp has done that. I think Mary Beth has reached out to them also, saying this funding's there, please apply. You know, the limitations with having to provide, not being able to do revenue replacement is a problem, and then having actual expenses, they have to have receipts that they can show their expenses, so that's a challenge.
Council Willingham?
Just to follow up on Councilor McKiernan's point, I would be supportive in the daycare. I know that the Boys and Girls Club had reached out to me. They're trying to ramp up because they've had a lot of interest, particularly with parents who have to work during the day and kids who need to have a virtual learning establishment, or during the days where they can't go. So I would be supportive if you all brought back an initiative to be flexible in the 5,000 for specifically daycare or childcare, things that can help folks go back to work. I understand why we wouldn't want to do it for the entire universe, but anything that can promote people being able to get back to their jobs and creating some sense of normalcy for their income levels, things like that. So thank you.
Absolutely, we'll do that. Yeah, EDA has been working with the Boys and Girls Club and that, trying to see where we can help, what we can do for the program.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Hill?
Thank you, Mayor. Celeste, under the public schools funding, do you know if any of the funds are going toward kids with special needs in schools?
What my understanding is, they're going to buy the bus, and then they're using a lot of that money for to help with internet access, like hotspots, those type of things, so that kids can be able to do the distance learning, the virtual learning. Now the schools, there are 250 that we allocated to the city's CARES Act. The schools have a separate pot of money with CARE, so I can follow up with the schools and see and get an answer to that question for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments? What is the pleasure of the body?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion from Willingham and a second from Herbstreit. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Celeste. You have a good evening.
For your time.
The next item we have on the agenda is a request of Sarah Zane Fire Hall LLC for a conditional use permit to convert ground floor of a single-family detached dwelling to multi-family use per section 9-2-16 of the zoning ordinance at 305 North Loudon Street, zone central business with historic Winchester district overlay. Good evening, Mr. Humans.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. This will be up here for the next three items. The first request.
You may have to speak up over the air conditioner a little bit.
Can you hear me better now? Okay. Thank you. The first request here is a conditional use permit for the residential dwelling that is situated just to the north of the former Sarah Zane building. Screen there. Thank you. This is a residential structure that has been a single-family residence, and the applicant is pursuing a redevelopment of the Sarah Zane building to have 4 units on the upper level of that building and commercial use on the ground floor. None of that requires a conditional use permit. However, the request to also convert this residential dwelling on the northern portion of the site to a 2-family instead of a single-family, that does require city council action, approval of a conditional use. The Planning Commission had a public hearing on this back last week. No one spoke in opposition, and the commission forwarded it to council recommending approval. The conditional use permit, of course, requires that council make a finding that it will not have a detrimental impact on adjoining property owners or businesses in the area. We do not see where that would be the case. The structure that is subject to this request is there on the right on the screen. Another view of that from the rear with the Sarah Zane Fire Hall in the background. Feel that this will be a desirable reuse. With conditional use permits, you also require a review of the floor plans. This is showing one of the two units here on the ground floor. They need to be at least 900 square foot. They are estimated to be around 942, so well above the minimum required. And then the unit that's proposed on the upper level, there's no concern. Likewise, there's no issues with the density on the site. It's about 16,000 square foot parcel, and they are only proposing 6 dwelling units with this first phase of development. The request was recommended for approval by Planning Commission, with 2 conditions. One was that BAR approval of any exterior changes be obtained, and that there be conformity with the submitted floor plans that you see. The last slide I have on this is just a slide that shows you the overall layout of the entire site. In the lower right there is the existing Sarah Zane Fire Hall building. They would be doing some enhancements to the front with some landscaping. The building that's subject to this conditional use is toward the top right, and there is some landscape area in the rear yard that would go along with this. During phase 1, they would have about 9 parking spaces at the rear, closer to the alley between this lot and the former First United Methodist Church. So be glad to answer any questions. Kyle Hopkins, the local architect, is the applicant on this request. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Tim? Councilor Willingham.
I don't have any questions. I think that, historically from downtown properties, we've not always supported ground floor residential, but I think this is a unique structure. It's always been a home. It's always actually served historically as the fire chief's home for Sarah Zane. So it's not like we're converting a commercial ground floor space into a resident. So I'm in support of this. I guess, Tim, the only question that I have for you is, one of the items that was a condition for the approval by the Planning Commission was that the BAR approve any exterior changes. But if they do pursue historical tax credits, they would not have, this condition would not be subject to that review.
That is correct. For
so do we need to make that a
elements,
condition, or do we need to say subject to pursuant?
that's a good point. You could make it, we can change condition 1 to say if applicable.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll make a motion to forward this with the 2 conditions that the Planning Commission made, but I will change the first to say if applicable after exterior changes. So it'd be BAR approval of exterior changes if applicable, and number 2, conformity with submitted floor plans.
Second, Wiley.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
The next item is a request of RCI Properties LLC for a conditional use permit to construct a non-compliant fence per section 18-9-4 of the zoning ordinance in the front yard of 206 West Wick Street, Zone Limited Industrial District. Mr. Humus.
Thank you again. This is also a conditional use permit. The Planning Commission did have a public hearing on this last Tuesday, and again, no one spoke in opposition. Commission did forward it to City Council recommending approval with a couple of conditions that I'll mention. Up on the screen, the highlighted property, which is quite irregular in configuration, is the subject site. It actually fronts on the public street at the top of the screen there, which is Commercial Street. And while it has a lot of frontage along what is utilized as Wick Street today, Wick is actually, as you probably will recall, a private railroad right-of-way. The city is pursuing the acquisition of a right-of-way there for public street purposes, but today that frontage is not considered a front yard or public street frontage. The applicant would like to secure approval of work that's already been done on the site to construct an 8-foot tall chain link fence There is a fence that runs along the Wick Street frontage, which does not require council approval for the conditional use permit. But because they want to have the fence where it has been installed along the commercial street frontage forward of the building, that puts it into the required front yard where only a 5-foot tall fence would be allowed. And so the request is to allow the existing fence that you see in this image to be approved so that they do not have to remove it. The fence is to support security associated with a chemical company. The company is subject to requirements of the Homeland Security Agency, and so this is their way of adhering to the federal regulations for the use. On the Wick Street side, this is an image that shows the fence there on the left-hand side. So you can get an idea. It's a fairly tall fence, but it actually will be less conspicuous from the legal frontage on commercial than it will be from the newly secured right-of-way public street frontage on Wick Street. The conditions that the Planning Commission put on the recommendation was that the fence height in the front yard be limited to 8 feet and that the fence be removed in the future if the CUP approval expires or if the use changes. Be glad to answer any questions, and local architect Tim Machado is here if you have any questions that I can't answer.
Are there any questions for Tim?
Mayor.
Motion to forward.
One second.
I'm sorry.
Mayor, if I may,
Councilor
my
Wallace.
disclosure here, I hereby disclose with respect to the following transaction. I have a personal interest in the transaction because of an interest in the business that is subject to the transaction may realize a reasonable foreseeable direct or indirect benefit from the detriment of this transaction. The name of the business is Howard Shockey & Sons, and the annual income from the business exceeds or is reasonably anticipated to exceed $5,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Willingham.
I'll make a motion to forward this with a favorable, with approval.
Second.
I have a motion from Willingham and a second from Beach. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is forwarded.
One recusal.
And one abstention.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next item is RZ-20-272, an ordinance to rezone 1.96 acres of land at 1811 Robert Street from Highway Commercial District to Highway Commercial District with Plan Unit Development Overlay and rezone a 0.04 portion of land at 1802 Robert Street from Limited Industrial District to Highway Commercial District with Plan Unit Development Overlay. Mr. Humans.
Thank you again, Mayor. Up on the screen, you can see the vacant parcel there toward the center of the image. Immediately to the east is the building at the southern end of Robert Street, which is commercial industrial zoning. And the proposal is to tie this new development on the vacant parcel to that site, as well as the right-in, right-out access that is situated along the the north side of westbound West Jubilee Drive there, which is identified as Holmes Street on the property. And that is an existing interparcel access that includes some off-street parking that goes underutilized right now, but that ties in with the bank that's there at the corner of Valley Avenue and West Jubilee Drive. This image also gives you an idea of the adjoining residential neighborhood to the north along Bellevue Avenue. I know some of the councilors got communication from some of the residents on Bellevue Avenue regarding potential traffic impacts associated with this development. I will point out that this is only 36 units as compared to upwards of 200, 150 to 200 units that you've been seeing in some other planned unit developments recently. So it's a more modest-sized development. Also, because of the convenient access there at Jubilee Drive, we do not feel that there will be any significant increase in total trips on Bellevue Avenue via Robert Street there. And actually, there would likely be a decrease in traffic seeking the existing multi-tenant building there to the east, particularly with regard to truck traffic. And that's something that I think the residents on Bellevue Avenue will greatly appreciate. In terms of the existing zoning versus proposed, on the left side of the image here, you can see the existing zoning. The red designates highway commercial B2. There are no overlay districts here, such as historic district, corridor enhancement, or PUD. On the right-hand side, that same parcel now has the diamonds on it, which would indicate that there would be planned unit development overlay, wherein the proposed 36-unit apartment development would be part of an approved planned unit development rezoning by council. The blue that you see there in the lower right of the image on the right-hand side is the existing commercial industrial building, and that is the CM1 zoning. There is a small portion of that CM1 zoning that's also being rezoned with the PUD overlay, and the underlying zoning is changing from CM1, commercial industrial, to B2, highway commercial. So a small change in that area. Couple of images there in terms of the view along Jubilee Drive. The top one is looking just to the west of the right-in, right-out, looking toward the northeast. The existing commercial building is in the foreground and some of the parking there. And then the image on the bottom is looking from the southeast toward the right-in, right-out, with the Citizens Bank in the background of that image. So again, the access is already provided at this location with respect to convenient access in and out, although there would be the connection out to Robert Street that then would tie to Bellevue Avenue. The applicant initially came to the Planning Commission, to the city staff, with a proposal for 2 multifamily structures and a small, that is 2,000 square foot, single-story commercial building, which is shown there in the lower right, with some parking out close to Jubilee Drive and also close to the parking that is associated with the existing commercial building. We feel that this development, by tying into that existing commercial development to the east, will actually make that existing commercial space more attractive, because now it will have access directly from a major commercial corridor, that is West Jubilee Drive. And it also allows for more room for the 2 residential buildings, which have been enlarged in size. Mr. Richard Pfeiffer Sr. Is working with Mr. Scott Rosenfeld, who did the Hyatt's Run development in northern Frederick County. And so the buildings have gotten larger, and we think that it would be better not to have the buildings jammed up. As you can see, the front corner, building 1, is very close to the, that is the back left corner. That building 1 is very close to the front right corner, building 2. And it also forces building 2 to be right up on the sidewalk, close to the back parking area. Instead, we looked at a proposal that eliminated the 2,000 square foot office building and allowed for better spacing of the 2 residential structures, and provided more separation from the single-family residential homes along the south side of Bellevue Avenue, there to the north of the site. So we feel that this, while it does eliminate the small commercial building, it renders a more suitable and better planned commercial development as part of this rezoning. And again, it does include the interparcel to the commercial developments, both to the east and to the west. So it's well planned in that respect. We do have a fiscal impact analysis and market analysis that was prepared May 27th of this year by Mr. Stu Patz, and you have that in the materials that were attached to this item in the agenda packet. If you take away the 2,000 square foot building, what today is a small net positive in terms of revenues minus expenditures of about $6,500 does in fact go to a negative number. But in terms of offsite impacts, it still remains quite high. The indirect impacts total $66,720 annually. And so in terms of total fiscal impacts, with the commercial building, it would have been $73,210 without that building, it still comes out to a net positive on an annual basis of 32,880. In terms of the quality of construction, it would be comparable to what's at the Hyatt's Run development. This is my attempt to try to Photoshop what was a 3-story building to make it look like a 4-story building with the 2-story wings. You probably can see where I cropped some things out. But this is what they are proposing for the larger of the 2 buildings, Building 2. So the wings that you see extending out on each side of this building, those are the 2-story wings of otherwise 4-story building. And those wings would have 2 one-bedroom units on each level, each of the 2 levels, so a total of 4 one-bedroom units. All of the other units in the 36-unit development are 2-bedroom units. And so the second building would not have the wings on it, so it would look very similar to this 4-story building without the 2-story wings on it. And again, these are images of the buildings that Mr. Rosenfeld constructed at Hyatt's Run up on Route 11 North, Frederick County. There would be some adjustments to the property line. You can also see that there are some easements that they're going to be working around here, but again, they are retaining the access easements. The other thing that eliminating the commercial building out front does is that it allows the applicant to come into greater conformity and actually full conformity with the 45% green area requirement. So again, we think that it's a good project. The Planning Commission had tabled this, I think, 2 times. I think it came to the Commission in July, and the applicant has continued to work to improve the proposal, most recently partnering with Mr. Rosenfeld. And we feel that it does represent good planning practice and is consistent with the comprehensive plan. Of course, this is directly across the street from the Jubal Square development, so it would not be unusual to have 3- and 4-story residential structures up close to the road in that area. The commission did forward it to City Council recommending approval, and you have that information in your packet, as well as the letter from the applicant indicating their conformity with the comprehensive plan. So again, it was reviewed on September 15th, the Planning Commission. They forwarded it to you, recommending approval, subject to the development plan that you see up on the screen here now. I should point out there is a picnic pavilion that's proposed over on the western end of the site, and then they have some raised planting beds that are proposed toward the rear of the longer parking lot, toward the top of the screen there. And they have dimensioned out a small wiffle ball play field, but that most likely will just be an informal play. For a smaller project like this, as compared to, say, Meadow Branch Apartments, where you have 300-some units, we would not expect them to be building indoor recreational amenities. So glad to answer any questions that council has on this.
Are there any questions? Councilor Willingham.
Thank you. Actually, I have several. Councilor McKiernan and I met with Melissa Morales, who lives on Bellevue Avenue, and I know we had some correspondence with you, Tim, and Perry, and Mary Beth. I did go back to look at a couple of things from our emails, and I don't think we actually got some of the follow-up data, Mary Beth, with respect to the traffic counts near Bellevue and Roberts. We talked about potentially doing an all-way stop there, whether that was going to be warranted, and then an increased signage and trimming of trees in that area to prevent potential. There's a lot of children that play at Bellevue because there's not sidewalks today. Obviously there's a big public safety concern. Even though there may not be as much traffic as normal, I still think that just given the layout of that, people could be parking in those parking lots, and that's a pretty dangerous area around that corner if you drive over there. So I would like to follow up on those, because I do think those are important items before we approve this, or whether this gets approved or not. Tim, typically in a PUD, we get very detailed elevations. In this in this application, I don't see those other than the pictures that you had to include from Mr. Rosenfeld's previous application. Is that seems to be inconsistent with what we've done? Can you maybe speak to that for a moment?
Certainly. So with Mr. Pfeiffer partnering with Mr. Rosenfeld and with Mr. Rosenfeld committing to building this exact kind of development, in some respects, images of the actual building are as good, if not better, than an artist rendering.
Okay.
So you're right. We normally do ask for an architect's rendering.
But they're committing to this, so they won't get a building permit or any other approvals if they do not construct this specific rendering.
Typically, for the development plan, we look for it to be in general conformity with that plan. So I do not want to say that it will look exactly like this or have these exact exterior colors. But
I understand that,
yeah.
but it'll be very, very comparable.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Have we ever seen Stu Patz ever say there's been a negative impact to any residential project in the 15 reports that he's ever submitted to the city?
I have seen them, and I haven't bothered to bring them forward to you. So, yes, we've seen it at staff level. No, we've never suggested that it would pass muster with council.
Okay, all right. My last is, I also previously requested the potential review, either whether the EDA or the city goes through a housing study. I'm not singling out this project. I do support it generally if we can get a couple other things fixed, but we do have a number of apartments that have been applied for and going to be applied for, and we've talked about a housing mix that we would like to see within the city. We had a report done, I think maybe in 2012, that needs to be updated, that has not taken into consideration a number of new projects that have come online. So I do think at some point we need to see this. I'm not suggesting we hold up this project, but there are a fair amount of multifamily units coming online, which is great. I think the supply helps reduce the cost to our citizens, but I think we need to be cognizant of that as a city as we look at projects and what that potential impact is on our housing mix and opportunities for people to have home ownership opportunities and other things as we go forward. So I do strongly recommend and request we do get some type of housing study at some point. Thank you.
If I could, Mr. President, do want to point out on page 23 of the market and fiscal analysis by Mr. Patz, there is table 5, and that is an analysis of the current supply of multifamily product in Winchester and Frederick County, totaling just the project that they selected, 1,201 multifamily units. And in the last column, they have the vacant units identified for each of those projects, and that only totals 24 or 2%. So that was as of May of 2020 this year.
Understand.
Thank you.
It'd be nice to have an independent report. That's
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Councilor McKiernan.
I don't need to repeat what Councilor Willingham has covered.
Thank you.
I hesitate to agree that it's going to lessen the impact for Bellevue, because if you come out on Holmes Street or your access to Jubal Early is only going west, and so if you're a truck and you're heading to 81, if you're somebody coming out of the parking lot right there and need to get over on the east side of town or just to Pleasant Valley, I think they're gonna think twice about going and having to make a U-turn on Jubal Early. So I'm concerned with that, and therefore I would like to see some serious consideration to a four-way stop at Bellevue and Roberts and some rumble strips up to that, so that people are not flying out of that community onto Bellevue with no sidewalks and many, many children that play there. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
And I do think that Mr. Perry Eisenach is working on a response in terms of some of those improvements that are.
That's fantastic.
Thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, what is the pleasure of the body?
I'll make a motion before.
I have a motion from Councilor Veach.
I'll second.
Second from Councilor Hill. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
I think you're done for the evening.
Yes, but I may hang around for the chicken discussion.
Yeah.
You're so funny. The next item on the agenda is the request of Kyle Hopkins on behalf of property owner Karen Darby for conditional use permit under Code Section 17-2-5B pertaining to renovations in excess of 35% of the building value for a non-conforming structure during a one-year period. The property is located at 417 Fairmont Avenue, Zone Low Density Residential in Historic Winchester District. Good evening, Frank.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. So this is a CUP request for a residential structure that currently has 4 non-conforming apartments in it. The applicant would like to convert it into a single-family home featuring renovations. The issue is that, if you can see from this aerial, is a non-conforming structure. It's 10-foot setbacks in that area, and it only meets 6 feet on that north side. So in our ordinance, we have this code section, you can see here, 1725B, that takes the building value, you don't use the land value, and 35% of that improvement value is the maximum amount you can spend on a non-conforming structure in a single year. So the replacement value or the desired renovations is $250,000. The replacement value of that structure is $157,000. So we're at 159% of the replacement value of the structure. As you can see again from that code section, that if you were to exceed that 35%, it would need approval from City Council. It is certainly the opinion of staff and the opinion of the Planning Commission that this should be approved, and we're very supportive of this idea.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Frank?
Motion to forward.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Clark and a second from Councilor Veach. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The next item we have is an ordinance amending and enacting Chapter 5, Article 1, Animals and Fowl, Sections 5-14 and 5-16 of the City Code of the City of Winchester. Mr. Hopkins.
Yes, so I was originally contacted by Councilor Veach. He had a citizen who was interested in keeping chickens, who I believe we've heard from tonight. So I was directed through Mary Beth to start working on an ordinance, in which I did draft one and sent it over to Melissa, and we've produced a product you have for you today. I believe it is in your packet on page 124. I've selected some of the highlights in this PowerPoint. It is only for single-family residences. It is not in B1 or RB1, so basically downtown is excluded. No more than 6 chickens, 4 feet a square feet per chicken. A lot of regulations in there for the sanitary conditions that have to be maintained. No commercial sale of eggs, no slaughtering of birds, no roosters. A lot of regulations in relation to just kind of those quality of life things. I can tell you that I borrowed heavily from Harrisonburg's ordinance because I was familiar with that. I had that as part of my job when I worked there, and it seemed to work well in that town. And this would feature a permit. Here are the specifications for the permit. You'd have to draw out where on your property you'd be keeping this. The coop would be considered an accessory structure. So currently there's no setback for where you'd be able to put this structure, but that's something that could be added at any point in this process, or any other things that other regulations you'd want to add to this can certainly be added before this. Registration with Virginia Livestock and $25 fee. The purposes of bringing it here tonight is simply discussion as to whether you want to direct staff to take this through the process to have as an official ordinance or not. So I'm here to answer any questions.
Council.
Frank, thank you for bringing this forward to us. I've spoken with several citizens who are interested in keeping chickens. And in fact, some of the people that I've spoken with are already keeping chickens in the city. They're so unobtrusive that the neighbors don't even notice that they have them. So I'll certainly support this resolution. And you know, there are a lot of cities, there are over 30 or 40 cities in the Commonwealth who've changed their statutes in the last 5 or 10 years with great success. You mentioned Harrisonburg for one. I know Berryville just changed their ordinance a year or two ago. And most all of these cities have had great success. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Councilor Herbst.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Frank. I have a couple of questions. So how many properties do we have that are in the city that are over 2 acres?
That's a very good question. I did not research that, and I probably should have. I imagine it's not that many.
Yeah, so because this is 2 acres or more,
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say that that's the current regulations allow
Yeah.
for 2 acres or more. So I would say it's effectively not available to many citizens. This would change it from 2 acres to a single-family residence, which would open it up to many more,
Okay.
excluding B1 and RB1.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. Because I would be interested in not 2 acres, because I think that's very limiting.
That's what we have currently.
Right, yeah, exactly. And then I had a question. So I saw in here that, or can you say a little bit about the reason for limiting it to 6?
Yes, so again, I borrowed heavily from Harrisonburg. I think that's what we had there. Again, this is in the kind of preliminary stages. If we want to talk about more chickens or less chickens, I think it's just kind of a number that we've pulled from out of the air, really. There's a quality of life factor in zoning, whether you're going to be, what can I do with my property, and what is going to be too obtrusive for neighboring properties. And so 6 was the number that was arrived at.
Okay, all right. And then the other question I had was related to it referenced that I think it was the yard had to be fenced, or they had to be fenced in, and it made it seem like that it was the yard. And then it was talking about confining them to a pen. I'm looking at 5-14A B2 or A2. Where's that at?
I believe the code section's under F. 515.1 F has pens shall be located in rear yard and shall be situated at least 25 feet from any residential structure. In addition, all pens shall be located at least 20 feet from streams, tributaries, ditches, swales. It's basically from water and all other property lines.
Right. And if I was looking at section 5-14, keeping livestock and fowl within the city limits. B2, it says the livestock or fowl are securely fenced or otherwise prevented from escape. So I guess I'm interested in how much free range I would be more interested in free range or the option of free range rather than, pinning, putting chickens in a building where they have to be confined. And maybe that's a smaller fenced-in area, but I would be interested in being able to allow chickens to kind of run at least somewhat free.
Understood, and I think that's a view shared by many, many people. I think this is designed to have them at least at a minimum space, and then to have that fenced in so that they're contained in that space. How large you make your fence to contain them in a coop area, there's only a minimum specified here. I will say from a practical standpoint of someone who's enforced something like this before, you do certainly get calls where chickens are running loose.
Yeah.
So I think that was the interest in having some sort of penning of them. But again, I know it's what this discussion is about, honestly. There's going to be people who want free range and some people who want to have them contained. And so this is trying to meet something of both of those.
Yeah. Well, I would certainly support continuing to work through this and figuring out what we can come up with.
Sure.
Thank you.
Councilor Sullivan, and then do you have your hand up? Yes.
Well,
Councilor Sullivan.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. And thanks for the presentation. And also thanks to our guests that came tonight to speak. That was an excellent job. So congratulations. And again, thank you for coming. It was informative. I agree with virtually everything that you said. But when we sit in this position, we have to be objective. And that's my number one sort of job, I feel, is to be objective. And, as I kind of think through this process and listening to the comments and other council members, I can't help but point out that I think that as presented tonight, this lacks some information. There's nobody here from, for example, animal control that would have to oversee this. There's no stats from Harrisonburg or any of the other localities as to what some of the problems are. I would like to see that before I even get close to being in a position to approve it. And that's not here. So no way tonight could I, support approving it as presented. kind of where I'm at with this is that there's really no doubt in my mind that 95, 97, 98% of the people that would decide to get a chicken could keep it, or chickens could do a good job. The problem that we have to deal with from local government perspective is the 2 or 3% that can't.
Sure.
And what do we do in those situations? And what is the plan? And how much, stress is that going to put on an already stressed animal control office? My understanding is they get as many, if not the most calls out of all the different departments within the police department. Looking around my own neighborhood, we don't have a good ordinance in regards to feral cats. As far as I can see, we don't do anything about it. They're all over the place, at least in my neighborhood. Are they going to live, in harmony with the chickens? Maybe. I doubt it. That's just some of the things that I think we need to think about. But yeah, as far as next steps for me, it would definitely to call Harrisonburg, Charlottesville, Stanton, whoever else has got these things, and at least get some feedback and present it to council as to what maybe some of the drawbacks are. And then we have a better way to make an objective decision, because all we're seeing now is kind of all the good stuff. And that's fine, but doesn't give me enough information to be objective. And so that's what I would like to see moving forward. And I'll yield it back. Thank you.
Councilor Willingham.
Thank you. First, I do want to agree with Councilor Sullivan. Is it Elizabeth? You did an excellent job presenting tonight. That's very, very difficult for a lot of people.
Isabella.
You did an amazing job. What's that?
Isabella.
Isabella, I'm sorry. Great job, Isabella. Thank you for coming out. I will support this moving forward, but I do think that Councilor Sullivan does make a number of very good points and with respect to just getting some additional information. One of the items that I was going to potentially suggest is that if we do move this forward and gets approved, that we do maybe a 6-month review. I know sometimes on these new ordinances where we are introducing something that's not been done before necessarily, I don't think that we have that many by right chickens. I'm sure, to Mr. Clark's point, that there are some people that are violating the law as we speak, perhaps even him. But so I think we should at least revisit this. So I would like to no matter what we do, have it come back within 6 months or a year. I think that's an opportune time. And then as a follow-up point to Councilor Herbstridt's question, I do think the way that this language is written in the section F, it does say a pen shall be, let's see, where was it? I just missed it. Oh, in section E, sorry. At all times should be enclosed and covered. So with that, you would not actually, I guess you'd have to have some kind of roof structure. I think what you're probably trying to intend was that they would be fenced in, not necessarily the pen for them to stand all the time. So we might need to refine some of that language, at least the way that it's written, so that it's not interpreted otherwise. I don't think that was your intent to do that, but I think that's at least the way that it's written from a strictly reviewed perspective that I think somebody could see that. So I'm willing to let this move on. I think that it's got a number of great things about it. I do agree, though, we need to get some additional information before we do a final vote. But I do think that it's got enough of an interest for me that I would support it getting forwarded on tonight. So thanks.
Councilor Veach.
Thank you, Mayor. Frank, when you said it was not, could not be done in downtown, what is your definition downtown? A historic district or what?
So it's currently prohibited in B1 and RB1, which is largely downtown. Those are two zoning districts that are for downtown. It's downtown and kind of downtown to the south.
Okay. And you had mentioned something about Harrisonburg didn't have anything in the setbacks, but so that's why you put the 10 feet from property lines?
So we have that. This would be certainly considered an accessory structure. That we have regulations for that, which would be a zero setback from any property line, but we have increased restrictions in here to accommodate, to make sure that's further away from houses.
Yeah, I see the 25 feet from residential, whatever, but 10 from the property lines.
Right.
I am interested in Harrisonburg and any other successes or issues that they've had, see if we have to tweak this a little bit. I do appreciate the steps you took in here to address some of the issues like noise or concerns that neighbors may have. So I'm looking forward to it going forward and tweaking it and getting it through. Thank
Okay.
you.
Councilman McKiernan?
Good evening.
Hey.
So while we're talking with our neighbors, I think it would be important to have an actual number or a trend line in the increase of calls of communities similar to ours demographically in terms of composition and concentration of housing. Also, we regularly have fox that run through our neighborhood quite often. I would like to know if other communities, particularly like Harrisonburg or Warrenton, that have surrounding rural areas, do they see an influx of fox into their city when they start to house chickens? Because then we would be having an even larger animal control issue. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a couple of comments, but I have to say that I was so excited to talk about chickens that I actually skipped over 3.6, which we'll be going back to. So, but, so, where was I? Was it 5-4415? The residents keeping chickens must abide by the following. Also, there was mentioned that so in D, there should be no slaughtering of birds outside or enclosed structures. I've lived in communities where chickens were permitted, and I know that in some of those communities, they used them for rituals. And I don't see anything in this ordinance that discusses that. So by having chickens, are we going to be allowing people to use them as rituals? Because I know there was an issue in Herndon with slaughtering of animals in the street. And that's a concern of mine.
So just to be clear, this would prevent any sort of slaughtering of chickens in the city that isn't already done. And I don't see how this would open it up.
I think that if you add no rituals, because slaughtering is one thing, rituals are another.
Understood.
And what type of enforcement would we have to make sure that chicken coops or chicken pens are being kept in line with this ordinance?
Certainly. So this would go through a permit process. There is a permit ratification under 515.3. It says any person found in violation of those regulations can have their permit revoked. So any of the rules that are set forth in here, if they are violated, can have someone to lose their permit, which means they can't keep the chickens.
Who will be doing the enforcement?
That would be on zoning staff. So it would be certainly something that's an administrative addition to zoning ordinance for my office to enforce. Something to certainly consider, but it's also something that I've done before.
Okay. Are there any other questions or concerns? What is the pleasure of the body?
Motion to forward.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
I have one opposed.
Yeah.
Can we see a show of hands for those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. And those opposed? Did I miss someone?
Judy? I was 4.
4? So we have 5 in favor and 4 against. Thank you. So going back to 3.6, discussion on TA-20-365, an ordinance amending Section 18-6-2.3 of the Winchester zoning ordinance pertaining to off-street parking area and raised curb requirements. The amendment establishes additional options for developers to provide flat ingress and egress between the parking area and the building provided bollards are installed. Frank?
Yes, this is a privately sponsored text amendment from Pannoni and Associates. The general intent of it is to change the definition inside of our off-street parking regulations to remove, to allow for an exception to get rid of curbs and to install bollards. So instead, currently we have mandatory build-outs with curbs. This would make everything flat and have bollards in it. In addition, it adds a definition for the area exiting and entering the building to allow for outdoor seating and outdoor sales material in between the building and these bollards that would be installed. And all of that has kind of been sectioned off into another definition just for organizational purposes. But just the main intent of it is to allow for bollards instead of curbs on a commercial build-out. And currently that is available through the discretion of the planning director. This would make it something that a developer could take advantage of by right. So when I first started looking into this, I looked for APA guidance because I didn't have any idea whether a bollard or a curb would be superior. And what I found was that APA really wanted people to be tracked into pathways. So when you exit a structure, you're going to walk in some direction and then enter your vehicle. That way, pedestrians aren't interacting with vehicles, and people generally can see each other and know where they're at. And so a curb is something that they identified that would do this. You exit a store, you have your curb in front of you. Traditionally, you would walk along that pathway and then exit into the parking lot, and drivers would know that most likely someone's going to be walking down that exit along the curb and then exit to the parkway. It seemed to me that the concern would be if you make it all flat, that people could essentially disperse through the bollards in a way that would be against this APA guidance. There was some provisions in there, some guidance they had in there for installing either landscape buffers or coloring the sidewalk using pavers to delineate these areas where people will be walking versus drivers. We worked with the applicant to upgrade this. He included the colored pathways, which had not been in there before, but essentially didn't meet the guidance really fully of tracking him into the pathways other than providing that colored pathway. So this is in conjunction with a Royal Farms build out that's working its way through planning right now. This text amendment does not depend, or that site plan does not depend on this text amendment at all. They will build out with curbs or not, whether they successfully get this text amendment or not. This is an image I found online of a Royal Farms. You can see with the bollards installed. I think what's unique about this one, you can see there's kind of little half walls of stone that are not part of this application for a text amendment, but I think make some amount of aesthetic improvement. And I think in evaluating this, the aesthetics are going to be some portion of it beyond the walkway guidance, whether we'd like to have curbs or we'd like to have bollards, and what might look better, particularly in the C district where this Royal Farms will be going in. This is the front Royal store. It's a local one that's built out in a way that has the flat ground, no curbs, and has bollards. You can see it's got some of those rock face walls, but not like kind of half walls. It's really just all bollards along the way. And you can imagine if someone exits that store, you're not really contained by any of that bollards where you might walk out a store and walk along the curb. And you can see that effect in this next, well, that's another same build out of the front Royal store. And this next one, this is a local one, I believe in Loudoun County. You can see it has curbs and awning. Someone might exit this store, walk along and under the awning and the curb, and then exit to their vehicle. Someone driving in would have a good idea where they are or not. The reason given by the applicant for wanting the flat ground and the bollards is to reduce a tripping hazard. I think it's staff's position that we'd prefer the pedestrian corridors and the non-interaction of vehicles and pedestrians is a more serious concern than simply tripping. We do have provisions inside our code already for handicap spaces being flat, so if our most prone to tripping residents already can utilize that flat ground area to enter a business, it is our preference that we keep the curbs and not have the bollards or the flat ground and bollards. The other part, I think, is the overall long-term maintenance of bollards. One concern for us is, if someone keeps backing into them and as zoning administration, am I going out and then citing people for having bollards that are bent all the time? The applicant has certainly come back with that. We have maintenance on curbs as well. Does paint striping wash away? I think that's also a valid kind of counter argument. It's really up to whether we want to have pedestrians tracked into corridors and the ongoing maintenance of these things, or do we want flat ground for the purposes of reducing tripping hazards? So those are really the issues at play in approving this. I've worked with the applicant to make it as organizationally correct as possible, and he's been very amenable to that. Staff still does not support this, and the Planning Commission voted in denial of this on a split vote 5-4. I'm here for any questions.
You say Planning Commission denied it 5-4?
Yes.
Okay.
5-2? Sorry. It's 5.
Yeah, I was wondering where you were getting the
Yes.
other commissioners from.
Yes.
This needs direction from council, so the ordinance can be drafted. Are there any questions? Councilor Sullivan?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. So looking at it, we do have to keep in mind that it sounds like it came from planning with a denial, although, from a design perspective, I think it's a good idea. However, it would seem that it could cause problems with drainage, water and things like that, heavy downpours. I guess they can design the lot so it's going to run the other way, but we have some weird stuff happen around here sometimes when, water, wind and rain and snow and, things like that. I mean, that type of design I've seen it before, but because I think the climate around here, we don't see it a lot around here. So was that ever discussed or brought up with the applicant, or does it matter? Am I way off base here?
No, the drainage did come up in some of the APA readings I did, but in general, they didn't. If they were concerned about drainage, generally the idea, I think, in planning practice is to have water stay on site. You don't want it running off. You don't want a huge influx in your storm water management. Curbs certainly do track water into areas, and the planning practice really is much more in favor of creating a buffer using landscaping so that it drains into the landscaping. Mm-hmm. I can't speak to the engineering of how you build that out, but I assume that they would have it on some sort of a dispersed incline away from the building.
We hope.
Yes, one would hope.
Okay. Oh.
Councilor Willingham?
I guess I'm just trying to understand, maybe you said it, Frank, and I didn't clearly hear you articulate it, but at least in the research that I did, it looked like bollards were actually a more protective and potentially stronger. I know you're trying to delineate, but from a pure safety perspective, I'm trying to understand what benefit a curb gives us versus having a bollard. Can you maybe speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So that certainly is the case if somebody is going to be, I guess, driving into the building, right? And so if you are a pedestrian behind that, or you are sitting in seating behind that, I would agree with you that that would prevent that. A curb does some of that, right? It would at least indicate to somebody that they're hitting into something and they should stop. I think on an intentional drive over a curb or into a building, that bollard is probably superior.
Sure. And then I guess, Mr. Maslowski, did you have any comments to the stormwater management piece of that in this? I don't know if you took that into consideration in your proposal or thought process, but anything you want to do to address that?
Mr. Willingham, as far as the drainage
Ron,
is
do you want to
concerned,
state your name for?
I'm sorry. Ron Maslowski with Pannoni Associates.
Thank you.
As far as the drainage issue is concerned, if you go to most gas station convenience stores, they have this identical layout. The loss prevention coordinators are really pushing to eliminate curbs from sites because of tripping hazards. They all want to use bollards. In the past, the city has not allowed that to happen. They've required a curb. That doesn't. What I'm trying to say is, as far as drainage is concerned, all of those sites all drain away from the building. So that's how they take care of drainage. It's the same way the sidewalk area would drain if there was a curb. The sidewalk would drain across the curb into the parking lot. Okay. So I'm just trying to say that most gas station convenience stores all require bollards now, and they all drain away from the building, and I don't know of any issues at those other locations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Wiley.
Thank you. Just real quick, I see that they have a parking stop along with a bollard. That's another tripping hazard. So, Mr. Maslowski, is it necessary to have a parking stop or not?
Mr. Wiley, that was a requirement of the planning director if we were going to use the bollards.
Okay. I think that's a tripping hazard, if anything.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for the response on that. Another
Ron,
point I want to clarify.
Ron, you might as well stay up at the.
Yeah, another point I want to clarify is there's I think, Mr. Hopkins, you can clarify with us on this, is the colored transition, right? So when you're leaving the establishment, it's a colored, whether it's a stamped concrete or whatever you want to call it, it's colored, and then it transitions to the bollard, which is the regular concrete color. Is that correct?
Correct. So originally, that was not in the provision through Planning Commission. You know, I brought out that APA guidance that said that you could either do a curb, you could do the landscaping, or also some combination of that with some coloring, so that hopefully you would track people into these corridors. Anything you can do to get them into the corridors is what the APA guidance set forth. So Mr. Maslowski added the coloration part of the APA guidance to his amendment.
Thank you. I mean, my thought is I like the bollard idea as a solution. I mean, certainly anything to decrease in tripping and hazardous issues there, even when it's inclement weather and the like. I think it would assist. I mean, bollards certainly are very protective, and they're going to keep the vehicle from going forward into the building. So I think it's a great idea. I think it's something we need to consider moving forward. So I'll be in favor of this. Thank you.
Councilor Veach.
Thank you, Mayor. Frank, one of the things you keep saying up there is the pedestrian corridors.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean exactly by that?
So that language came directly out of the APA document I reviewed. And again, just the concept is you want your pedestrians in a corridor, in a line in an area, so that they know that they're safe from any vehicular traffic, and that the vehicular traffic knows where the pedestrians are. It's my fear that if you just leave it at flat and bollards, that people could more easily disperse in a way that is not really inconsistent with that planning practice. The coloration, I think, certainly would add to that. That's why that was included, but I also think that's kind of the minimum in making that corridor. I think either having a curb, which people are inclined to stay on before they step off, or landscaping would certainly prevent them from ever leaving a corridor if it's thick enough. So that's what we've arrived at as a compromise of getting through here. But again, staff is still not supportive of the general concept.
So the corridor basically is, for lack of better terms, the sidewalk area that's behind the curb front. So here's a parking lot, here's a curb, and then our corridor.
Right.
In a traditional way.
Yes.
I guess I'm sort of like Councilor Wiley. The Bowards, you know, if you got the Bowards and you have discolored or different colored from the parking area, you have a corridor, which I think is even safer, because being in insurance, I'm always hearing where people confuse the brake and the gas, and they run up over the curb and into a building. So I can see the Bowards actually stopping that, being safer for the people in the building. And I can see an applicant concerned with the tripping, because they're on the hook for the liability, and they're just trying to drop that off for safety for citizens. So could it not be a corridor where you have the Bowards? You have different color in the corridor area and different color on the parking, and they would know the difference. They wouldn't step out past the Bowards, because the Bowards define it, and different color pavement.
I agree with you to some extent. I just don't think it's as strong as the other types that I listed and described. I think the other concern also, again, is the maintenance over time. People knocking them, and what does it look like when we have this exist for however many years, and you get kind of this effect of bollards that have been rammed into and whatnot. I think, honestly, Royal Farms or some other quality tenant probably would do a good job of keeping them up. But again, this is something that could apply to anybody that comes in and applies to build anything. And I question the long-term aesthetics of bollards and as they get run into over time, and what the quality of a property owner to fix those. And I think that would, particularly in the corridor enhancement district, be something of an issue and less superior than to say the ease of curbing or landscaping, which would also look great.
Yeah, I would think the property owner would rather paint the bollards every so often and maintain them than pay lawsuits for tripping. So I tend to agree with Councilor Wiley. I'd like to see more, but I'm in favor of it right now. Thank you.
Judy had her hand up, and I'd like to speak.
Judy, Councilman McKernan.
Very quick question. So is the owner open to the landscaping option within that corridor in addition to the different color?
That's, I guess, up to Mr. Maslowski. He's gone through every single one of these meetings. He did adopt the coloration part of the APA guidance. He certainly could have included that at any point. My assumption was that it probably was not as favorable to him to put that in.
Because I would see that be favorable with since it's a corridor enhancement area.
I would agree.
Councilor Clark.
I was interested to see in the packet that there are some real-world examples here in Winchester, Virginia, of businesses that are not experiencing any unusual effects of not having curbs and using bollards. The Home Depot and the Walmart do not have curbs, and they do use bollards. And there haven't been, I mean, I'm not aware of any complaints or incidents with the bollards or people not walking correctly because there's no curb to step off of. So that speaks volumes to me that these businesses have, I mean, obviously sloped the concrete away from the building so there's not a drainage issue. But I mean, I haven't heard of a single issue with either one of these businesses that are really high volume, getting people in and out of the building without any kind of ill effects. So that tells me a lot.
Thank you. Councilor Hill.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hopkins, for bringing this forward. I am really pleased to see that Royal Farms wants to locate business here. So I'm very pleased about that. And that's good. I am concerned about the safety issue. I like the idea of the ballards as well as the, I guess, pedestrian corridor that would be kind of painted. But like Councilor McKernan said, I'd be interested in knowing if the owner would be willing to do some landscaping in there, as well. But anything that would help provide more safety for its patrons, I think, would be very good. So I'm pretty much in favor of this idea.
Okay.
Frank, taking a look at this, I would suggest, and just listening to the other councilors here, that you take a look at the existing code. We're trying to bring businesses in, and we need to be a little bit more flexible. And I think bollards, as opposed to the curbs, seems to be a little bit more favorable. I don't want to start nitpicking at projects when people want to invest into the community. And looking at a project, if it seems that it works and everything else is fine, I don't want to start putting restrictions on people like that. So we're supposed to provide some guidance, and I think that we need to go back and look at the existing code and make it a little bit more flexible for businesses. And from what I'm hearing is that most councilors are fine with the bollards. So so I'll entertain the motion.
I'll make a motion.
Forward.
Second.
Wait 1 second.
It's fine, whoever else can do it.
Say that again, I'm sorry, Councilor.
I think it just shows it as a discussion. We think
Yeah. So this was a discussion item. So basically, you've taken notes of what most of the councilors have suggested. And then you'll bring this back before us with some changes?
Yes.
Okay. Councilor Willingham?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
So we fine with that?
Yeah, great.
Okay. Frank, thank you.
Thank you.
Did we ever do 3.5, Mr. President?
You were in the bathroom?
Yes.
Thanks. I was just asking. Thank you, Mr. Miley, for pointing that out.
Okay, the next item is a resolution authorizing common council committees presented by Councilor Willingham.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great. So from the last meeting that we had, there was an interest in moving forward with the committees. This resolution tonight is to basically start to codify those with the creation of the Finance Committee, the Public Safety Committee, and there was an additional one added, which would be Boards and Commissions Committees after consultation with city staff and city attorney. As discussed, these committees would be delegated the responsibility of conducting the work session items that we would do at a normal meeting like this, concerning those items that are specifically relegated to finance, public safety, and boards and commissions. They would then be brought back to this body in our regular meeting for review and discussion. It also includes the conduct, administration, and ultimately, at some point, we would, obviously need to disclose and provide information about when we would be meeting. But this was an effort to provide additional clarity and information about what the boards would be doing and their roles, and answer any questions, hopefully, that would be asked by this body or citizens who would be interested in this review. The only item that I had that I wanted to bring to the attention to you, Mary Beth, if no one else has any other questions, is for the Finance Committee in Section 2 under the audit. It says that this committee would manage the city's internal audit function, but I think it probably needs to say that it would provide oversight comparable to what it does with the external audit review. So we would not be managing that function, but more providing oversight. So otherwise, open up for council conversation and discussion.
Councilor Herbst.
Yeah, thank you. I just had a question with regards to the Finance Committee charter. Under C, meetings and quorum, the second to the last sentence there, it says the chair may excuse any non-committee members from attendance at any meeting or portion of any meeting. Just wanting a little bit more information about that specifically, and when we talk about Freedom of Information Act, what I guess I'm questioning that, if somebody can respond to that. I don't know if it's Mary Beth or
Melissa.
Melissa.
It's Melissa.
If you, the non-committee, I guess, I shouldn't really say members, maybe that is not, it's a little bit confusing, but the idea is that there will be other staff, other people potentially invited specifically for a meeting and to talk about who may have specific relevant experience or information about a particular item or issue in front of the Finance Committee. So it's sort of anticipated that the Finance Committee will be meeting regularly with the same people who aren't members of the committee but are, facilitating and participating with committee to help them with their discussions and moving it forward. So I guess the idea is that if the committee, for some reason, somebody who they wanted to come or that has been coming a lot wasn't able to meet, it would not necessarily delay, up to the committee chair, the meeting. They could still meet without it. And, it's actually designed to provide some flexibility, but perhaps it creates some more confusion than it adds. And we're really open to what these committee members, council members, would want to see as far as functioning. So we're amenable to suggestions or edits or changes to that, and I don't want to confuse it or don't want to confine it to an area that's not helpful to the committee.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, above it talks about, that the meetings are public and open to everyone. So to me, it just seems a little bit confusing, like it's open, but then the chair may excuse any non-committee members from attending at any meeting or portion of meeting. It just seems like it's kind of excluding folks. So, I mean, at least that's how it was confusing to me when I read it. So
And it's not
I don't
meant
know
to
about
be
others.
excluding people, but it's just if someone who regularly attends isn't able to.
Yeah.
They don't have, like they can say, yes, we'll still have the meeting, and even though you're unable to attend.
Yeah.
But perhaps we could rework that to be clearer.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Before we vote on this, I do have a suggestion that, and maybe Melissa or Mary Beth could chime in on this. Should we at least, so if this is forwarded to the next meeting, should we at least have an idea of what the times would be for a meeting? And do you need me to provide the names of those who will be on those committees?
First, to address your last question, the way it's structured now, unless the council desires otherwise, it's the president who selects the members. And I purposely didn't put it in the charter or the resolution who the initial members will be, so that you wouldn't need to change the charter or change anything to have, future, different members of the committee. As far as the meeting times, if council or the committees already know what dates they would like to do, that could be helpful. But again, I would envision that may be more of an administrative or a procedural matter that could be outside of the charter.
Okay.
So that if they wanted to change it, then it wouldn't have to go back
Gotcha.
to a new
Gotcha.
resolution or a new charter.
Okay, thank you very much. What is the pleasure of the body?
Motion to forward.
Second.
I have a motion from Wiley and a second from Veach. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Willingham.
You're welcome, Smith.
The next item on the agenda is a motion to forward the nomination request of Scott Kinzinger to the Winchester Frederick County Local Emergency Planning Committee.
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next item is a motion to forward the appointment of James Pete Lowe to the Winchester Parks and Recreation Advisory Board to a 3-year term ending October 12, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Hill and a second from Willingham. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I have a motion to forward the appointment of Joshua Huff to the Winchester Frederick County Tourism Board, private sector, for a 3-year term ending October 12, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Motion from Wiley and a second from Hill. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Have a motion to forward the appointment of Julie Schaefer to the Winchester Frederick County Tourism Board, private sector, for a 3-year term ending October 12, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Wiley, motion, a second from Herbster. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Wiley, Willingham, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.